You already know mornings are different. Not because someone convinced you, because you've lived both kinds. The mornings where you control the first hour feel different from the ones where the day starts before you're ready. It's not productivity. It's not discipline in the motivational speaker sense. It's something quieter. And neuroscience has a very specific name for what you've been building before anyone else wakes up, even if you never called it anything. Most people wake up and immediately hand the first minutes of their day to someone else. Phone, news, other people's problems. And that's not laziness. The dopamine pull of incoming information is real, and the morning content industry knows it. That's why 90% of morning routine advice is productivity theater. But there's a subset of people building something entirely different before 8 a.m. This is the psychology of what they're actually doing and why it holds. No input for the first 30 minutes. Your partner checks their phone the second they wake up. Your colleagues are already texting at 6 a.m. You don't respond until you're ready, and people have called it standoffish, unavailable, even arrogant. And there's something real in that reaction. Your silence does register as distance. But here's what's happening biologically. Your brain has what researchers call the cortisol awakening response, a 30 to 45-minute window after waking. That research published in Psychoneuroendocrinology shows is your peak stress calibration period. Flood it with other people's information, and you've handed your nervous system's set point for the entire day to a notification. You don't do that. Not anymore. Cold exposure. People think you're performing wellness aesthetics. Cold showers as a personality. And most people who post about it are. But the mechanism is different from the content. Research published in Biological Psychiatry found that brief cold exposure triggers a norepinephrine increase of up to 300%. Norepinephrine is the neurotransmitter responsible for attention focus and critically stress tolerance. You're not shocking yourself awake. You're calibrating your threshold for discomfort before the day gets to set it for you. That's not biohacking. That's inoculation. Move before you think. You don't call it a workout. You just move before email, before coffee, before anyone needs anything from you. People assume it's about appearance. And there's an appearance piece to it, sure. But Dr. John Rady at Harvard Medical School spent years documenting what happens to the brain after physical movement. He calls BDNF brain-derived neurotrophic factor, the mechanism that primes neural connections for learning and measurably reduces emotional reactivity. You move in the morning because your brain operates differently afterward. That's not motivation. That's neuroscience. Natural light before screens. People assume you're living some low-tech fantasy because you stand by a window before you open a laptop. And most morning light advice is aesthetic nonsense. But your eyes contain specialized photoreceptors that signal your suprachiasmatic nucleus to anchor your circadian clock. Morning sunlight tells your brain exactly when it is in the day. It sets the melatonin timer for that night, the cortisol suppression curve for the afternoon, and the alertness window that determines how many hours of real cognitive function you actually get. A screen doesn't do that. The sky does. Write one sentence. People around you don't journal. They see it as soft, self-indulgent something people in therapy do. And most journaling is exactly that, pages of wandering that never arrive anywhere. But writing one specific sentence before the day starts activates the prefrontal cortex, the region responsible for rational decision-making, before the emotional brain gets fully online. A woman once noticed her coworker do this every morning before their first meeting. She finally asked what he wrote. He turned the notebook. One sentence. The one thing I won't let today take from me. She laughed, thinking it was dramatic. 3 years later, she kept her own notebook. She didn't call it journaling. She called it targeting. The prefrontal cortex doesn't need a paragraph. It needs a target. Follow for more on the psychology of quiet intensity. Set one priority. You're not a to-do list person. 20 items at 8 a.m. feels like a sentence, not a plan. And long lists don't fail because people are lazy. Roy Baumeister's research on decision fatigue, published in the Journal of Personality and Social Psychology, found that decision-making quality drops measurably over the course of a day. Every decision depletes the same finite resource. One priority written before anything else means your clearest thinking goes where it matters. Everything else runs on the system you already built. That's not minimalism. That's architecture protecting your best resource. Sit with nothing for a few minutes. People notice when you're not filling silence. What are you doing? Just sitting. The pause in the conversation after that says everything. And something is genuinely uncomfortable about watching someone tolerate stillness in a culture that treats quiet like a malfunction. But stillness isn't absence. Neuroscience calls it the default mode network, the brain's background processing system. Research shows the DMN handles memory consolidation, perspective integration, and what psychologists call self-referential processing. The minutes you spend staring at nothing are when your brain files what happened, connects what's disconnected, prepares what's next. The people who can't sit still aren't more productive. They've just outsourced their thinking to noise. But here's the question I need you to sit with. Is the structure you've built something you genuinely believe in, or is the morning routine a way to feel controlled because other parts of your life feel out of control? Both look like discipline from the outside. One is foundation. The other is avoidance, wearing the right vocabulary. You're the only one who knows which one it is. Protein before caffeine. Your colleagues skip breakfast and think they're running lean. You eat something real before you touch coffee. They call it extra work. And the performance of fasting does look like discipline. But cortisol is already elevated in the morning. Caffeine on an empty stomach amplifies that cortisol spike without giving your brain the amino acids it needs to synthesize dopamine and serotonin. Protein provides tryptophan and tyrosine, the precursors to those neurotransmitters. You're not eating for energy. You're laying neurochemical groundwork for mood stability before 9 a.m. That's not wellness. That's substrate. Do one thing you completely control: making the bed, cleaning the counter, organizing something nobody asked you to touch. People call it compulsive. And sometimes it is rigidity and structure look identical from the outside. But Dr. Lisa Feldman Barrett at Northeastern University found that emotional resilience correlates strongly with what she calls interoceptive accuracy, your ability to read your own internal states clearly. One act of complete control in the morning calibrates your sense of agency before the world starts imposing its agenda. Your brain registers, I made something happen. That's not compulsion. That's setting the locus of control before anyone else gets to it. No consuming before creating. You don't check news, social media, or podcasts until you've done the first thing that matters. People who do the opposite call you disconnected. You are. Deliberately. The brain's generative systems and its responsive systems run on different modes. When you consume first even good content, you spend the morning running on other people's patterns, frameworks, questions. When you create first even something small, you're running on your own. The morning is the only part of the day where your thinking hasn't been shaped by what everyone else is thinking. Some people protect that window. Most people don't know it's worth protecting. If you're a man, you've probably been told that this kind of structure is avoidance, that emotionally healthy people don't need a morning. This deliberate, that you should be able to handle whatever the day throws at you the moment it arrives. What they're calling your flexibility is reactivity, What they're calling your control is calibration. Those are not the same thing. And anyone who's ever been underprepared for a hard day already knows the difference. Bridges don't announce themselves. They're load-bearing before you get there and still standing after you leave. The architecture you build before the world starts asking things of you works the same way. People won't see it. They'll just notice that you hold. Which of these 10 did you recognize immediately, something you already do but never had a name for? Drop it in the comments. And if you know someone whose mornings hold them together in ways most people don't notice, send this to them. Sometimes just having the language for it changes how you explain yourself. Follow for more on the psychology of quiet intensity.